Music legend and cultural icon David Bowie is remembered across the globe after passing away from cancer at the age of 69. The Riyadh-Tehran feud continues as Iran's foreign minister lashes out at Saudi Arabia in a New York Times op-ed accusing the kingdom of supporting barbaric extremism. And after a brief delay, humanitarian aid reaches the besieged Syrian town of Madaya, where thousands are trapped and some have reportedly died of starvation. Welcome back to the news today. Delegates from Afghanistan, Pakistan, China, and the United States met in Islamabad today for talks to resurrect the long-stalled Afghan peace process. It comes as fighting with Taliban insurgents intensifies in the country. I-24 News defense correspondent Shai Ben-Ari has the details.
Talks began Monday in Islamabad, Pakistan, between 4 different countries with the aim of facilitating a peace deal between the government of Afghanistan and the Taliban. The Taliban itself is not represented at the talks for now, while officials from the Afghan government, the United States, China, and Pakistan are.
The primary objective of reconciliation process is to create conditions to bring the Taliban groups to the negotiating table and offer them incentives that can persuade them to move away from using violence as a tool for pursuing political goals.
Though a negotiation effort is underway, the Taliban is very much on the offensive, making territorial gains recently in the southern Helmand province, as well as conducting a series of attacks in the capital, Kabul. Many see this as an effort to gain leverage in the talks, and there has been speculation that Taliban leader Mullah Mansour could eventually give the go-ahead for the group's official participation in the process. Islamabad has influence over certain factions of the Taliban, and indeed some of the group's leadership is thought to be in Pakistan.
Threat of the use of military action against irreconcilables cannot precede the offer of talks to all the groups and their response to such offers. It is therefore important that preconditions are not attached to the start of the negotiation process. This, in our view, will be counterproductive.
Pakistan will likely be looking to persuade the Afghan government to cool relations with its rival, India, before applying any serious pressure on the Taliban. Meanwhile, one faction that is splintered off from the Taliban has rejected any sort of foreign involvement in the peace process, Pakistani or otherwise. The road ahead is likely a long one.
And with me right now is Colonel Richard Camp, former commander of British forces in Afghanistan. Good evening. Good to see you again.
Good evening. Very nice to see you again. It's been a long time.
It's been a long, long time. Still waiting for you to visit here in the studio. But until then, Colonel Camp, are we about to see some kind of a solution to this complicated situation?
Unfortunately, I don't think we are, because for a number of reasons. One of which is that the Taliban is deeply split. Since the death of Mullah Omar, there have been rival leaders running elements of the Taliban, including Mullah Mansour, who we heard about, and also Mullah Rasul, who has split off essentially from the main part of the Taliban. So the Taliban is more fractured even than it was before. Secondly, and I think there is tension, as your correspondent said, there is tension between the two groups. Secondly, Pakistan, of course, is in many ways the deciding element here. Pakistan control the Taliban to a very large extent. And only if Pakistan decide that it's the right thing to do now for the Taliban campaign to come to a conclusion, or at least to change in its nature, will that happen?
Colonel Camp, with the rise of ISIS and the current situation that we're watching around the world concerning terror, how, let's say, strong is the Taliban in Afghanistan today?
It's very strong. It's been gaining its strength since before and also after the main withdrawal of Allied forces from Afghanistan. There are still some there, but not in very large numbers and not in permanent fighting roles on the ground, although they do back up the Afghan forces. But the Taliban is very strong now and is making important gains, also making some losses. But they are suffering as a result of the rise of the Islamic State, as in other countries around the world. Particularly in the Middle East, the Islamic State is on the rise in Afghanistan, as it is indeed on the rise in Pakistan. And they're attracting some membership from the Taliban over to their own organization. So this, of course, does weaken and undermine the Taliban. Personally, I don't think the Taliban have any interest whatsoever in peace talks with the Afghan government as it's constituted today. But we can hope they do, but I don't have much confidence in that happening.
Colonel Camp, how are they trying to, let's say, win back the lost prestige because of the rise of ISIS? How are they trying to get back, let's say, to the game and be still the strong Taliban that we know and familiar with?
Well, of course, their main currency is violence, and they gain supremacy, they gain power and influence by intimidating people, by killing them, by torturing them, by threatening them. And that's the main way that they go to power. So they will, if anything, I think, increase and intensify their campaign to try and prevent people from splitting off and prevent, perhaps more importantly, prevent communities in Afghanistan from supporting the Islamic State rather than supporting them. That was their main campaign tactic when they were fighting Western forces there. The West were trying to be nice to the local people, which was seen as weakness to a large extent. The Taliban were making absolutely clear who was the strong horse here. It was them, it wasn't the West. Not because the West had less military power, of course it didn't, but because the West were less intimidating, the people were less terrified of the West.
Yes. Colonel Richard Camp, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for this. And with me here in the studios, Daniel Roth, I-24 News economy correspondent. Good evening.
Good evening.
So let's talk a little bit about, we spoke about Russia and about its intervention in the Middle East and its, giving weapons to Hezbollah, not giving weapons to Hezbollah, but in the meantime, the currency there is going down the hill.
Yes, the currency, the economy, the market, it seems like everything's in negatives for them. This past year, they reported a 3.8% contraction in GDP. It's very big. They were expecting growth this year. It's looking like it's actually going to shrink. Look, it's oil. Oil prices are down. It's hurting oil exporters. Russia, their federal budget, their national budget is 50% reliant on oil. Their 70% of their export revenue is energy related. Oil is everything, and their whole budget is set on a $50 barrel. And right now, oil is trading about $20 less than that, a little less than $20 less than that.
You know, I'm trying to understand how Russia is basically reinventing or rebuilding itself from this really, really bad economic situation?
Right now, they're not having much success. They're putting on a strong face.
Spending so much money in the Middle East.
Absolutely, and they've got about $350 billion in their pocket. So they're much more liquid than they were in the 90s, the last time they faced a major crisis like this. But they're not actually succeeding right now. They're, like I said, their entire basis is oil. They're also they were looking to China to sell a lot of their oil and natural gas. China is now the biggest, they take the most oil from Russia as opposed to Saudi Arabia, who they took from before. But China's not doing well. So across the board, whether it's the oil prices or the Chinese economy or Russia's spending in the Middle East, across the board, you're looking at a country that doesn't have a long-term plan necessarily. That's what we're seeing.
Daniel Roth, thank you very much. It will be interesting how economy will affect the intervention of Russia in Syria.
Absolutely, it always does.
It always does, of course. Daniel Roth, thank you very much for this.
Thanks.
Germany's interior minister has called for urgent and tough legislation to punish the perpetrators of the mass assault in Cologne on New Year's Eve, while warning that the crime should not lead people to be suspicious of all migrants. Shah Ben-Ari has more on Europe's growing challenge.
The consequences of events in Cologne and other German cities on New Year's Eve are bringing the new reality currently being faced by German society and Europe as a whole into focus. The outset of the new year saw a range of offenses committed by newly arrived migrants, mainly targeting German women. More than 600 criminal complaints have been registered thus far, over 500 of them in Cologne alone, with 40% sexual in nature, including 2 alleged rapes. A dangerous backlash has already begun.
We know of 4 crimes committed in the city center last night where people of non-German origin became victims of physical violence. In close vicinity of these events, a group of 15 young men of German nationality was stopped and checked. The investigation is ongoing whether this group is responsible for this crime.
The weekend had already seen violent protests by right-wing extremists, including the anti-immigrant Pegida group. German politicians have been busy issuing condemnations in all directions.
When asylum seekers are being insulted as cattle, when they or their refugee shelters are being set on fire, or when asylum seekers call women crossing the streets whores, all this is absolutely unacceptable.
Decisive action has also been promised.
I am in constructive discussions with my colleague Justice Minister Maas over what consequences should be drawn, and I mean fast. I don't think we can afford long debates over these issues.
Events in Cologne present an obstacle to the German Chancellor's efforts to maintain an open-door refugee policy. Other EU members are already showing reluctance to accept additional migrants. With few issues more contentious these days, it is doubtful that any political debate on the subject will be limited in terms of both time and scope.
Yes, with me right now is Polina Garayev, I-24 News Berlin correspondent. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening.
Well, Polina, the damage is already done. We are seeing, of course, people, we don't need a lot that people will put stereotypes in our minds, especially concerning the migrants. How is Germany dealing with that in the last few days?
Well, there hasn't been another case that has caused Germans to rethink their attitudes towards migrants as the events in Köln. According to recent polls, 49% of Germans now believe that such a mob can hit in their own cities. 57% fear a rising crime, and 37% have become more critical towards migrants in general. Now, although the majority of citizens testify they haven't changed their minds towards the refugees and other asylum seekers, it's clear that those who were opposed to this refugee influx in the first place, who were on the fence, are now being radicalized. Now, the authorities are trying to reassure the public by saying that they're re-examining the police activity and trying to harshen laws to ease deportation of convicted criminals, or also to stop them from flooding the big cities, which is what we're seeing now. But so far, we are already seeing a phenomena of people becoming vigilantes, answering the calls on Facebook, demanding a manhunt for the perpetrators. And already yesterday in Köln, there were 2 incidents in which groups of Germans have attacked people of a foreign background, even causing 2 of them to be sent to the hospital with serious injuries.
Polina, I'm wondering how it will affect, let's say, the policy of Angela Merkel, the woman that was just chosen to be the Woman of the Year on Time magazine cover. So, I'm asking myself if she will change the policy, because she will understand that she, in one point or another, she will have to satisfy also the people who are living in Germany.
I see. Well, so far, Merkel has been clear that she does not plan to change her core policy, which is granting asylum to whoever needs it. And the steps that we have seen her take so far, including her support for the tougher laws against convicted migrants, is an attempt to preserve this policy, this core idea that she has been promoting so far. Now, as was mentioned before, Germany does not have time for a longer debate, but it seems that the only thing that could curb this wave of incitement is the apprehension of the perpetrators in Cologne, which, as time passes, it becomes more and more likely.
Yes, Polina Garayev, thank you very much for this conversation with us. And with me right now, how are you?
Hello, Lucy.
Gentlemen.
Good to be here.
Dov Lipman, former member of Israeli Parliament Yesh Atid Party. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. And
also Charles Butler, deputy editor of the news today. Good evening. I really think that we jinxed Hillary Clinton, because we were sitting here saying, look, the email scandal just vanished. She used Bill Clinton, the card. We thought that it's a little bit too soon. Maybe it is a little bit too soon.
Whose mind you now looking like a liability? Absolutely.
Which is unbelievable.
The sources are saying that the FBI is under tremendous pressure to expand their investigation beyond the emails. And the emails, they managed their way to get through it, and they swam through it, and everything was fine. But now we're talking about real corruption, possible abuse in terms of having a foundation and improper use of that power together with the State Department. Corruption. Outright corruption is something which, if the FBI is investigating it, put together with, like Charles said, the history of her husband, this could be a major, major story. When you add the fact that they're in a dead heat, Bernie Sanders and Hillary in Iowa and New Hampshire, we're going to have some excitement here on the Democratic side.
Yeah.
She may actually have to move to Israel to serve as a politician again. I'm sorry, given dairy this week.
Charlie!
I'm serious. This is actually a big problem. I've said a number of different times that barring any force majeure, it looked that Hillary would cruise almost maybe to the White House even. But now she has a big, big problem, and she's even starting to slip in the polls. I mean, there was a new poll out this week by IBD-TIPP that shows her 4% ahead of Bernie Sanders on a national level, which is unbelievable. It may be a bit of an aberration, granted that other polls are showing her way out in front still by about 10 to 15 points, but there is a trend, and even in Iowa, he's closed the gap to a couple of points. He's ahead firmly in New Hampshire.
A week ago, 2 weeks ago, we were sitting here, we are saying that she is leading this race. She is apparently going to win the race with Sanders. She is probably, if Donald Trump will end up the leader in the Republicans, she will beat him. How come now she might just, lose everything?
So I think at a certain point, people started asking themselves, and they'll continue to ask themselves, why? Why has she been crowned? And I don't think they're flocking to Bernie Sanders because they even necessarily understand his ideology or what he stands for. It's just he is the other choice. Let's remember, we just heard now a Mercury Analytics poll that says that 20% of Democrats would vote for Trump over Hillary Clinton.
Would migrate parties.
Yeah. But not just parties, but to Trump.
They hate her that much?
There is the building sentiment, and I personally feel if Bernie Sanders wins Iowa, and he wins New Hampshire, which the polls do have him winning, there's a certain momentum. That's how it works in these races, where she's going to be scrambling, especially if she's under an expanded FBI investigation. At a certain point, we might be in for a big surprise.
Losing Hillary Clinton?
And you also saw with Hillary, another blow to Hillary this week was the fact that the White House Chief of Staff McDonough came out and said that Obama was not going to support any primary candidate. And this was seen as a jab to Hillary. He said that he was going to do what he's done in the past. But if you saw, they virtually rolled out the red carpet for Joe Biden. This is a hit, especially because...
What about Bill Clinton? What he is going to do about that?
I don't think he could come in this situation and start explaining. No, if he comes out and starts talking about my foundation, that's going to ruin it. She has to try to distance herself from the whole foundation issue, and therefore I don't see a way for him to jump in and save her from this.
I'm mumbling. You know what it says? It says that Donald Trump might be the next president of the United States. It is a possibility, gentlemen.
And let me just say, Charles mentioned Israeli politics. There's a phone call going out in Iowa saying, we urge you to vote for Donald Trump because he's the one candidate who will only accept immigrants who are good for America. Lucy, excuse me for saying this. We don't need Muslims. We need smart, educated white people who assimilate to our culture. Vote Trump. This is the phone call going out in Iowa, and this is the person. Again, it's not his advertisement. Let's be fair.
To get to the United States at least twice.
Fair enough, but let's put things into perspective. Donald is not invincible, and he's coming up against some stiff competition now from Cruz, who now I believe is firmly in front in Iowa. He was just there on a 6-day tour, 28 counties, taking it very, very seriously. He's closed the gap in New Hampshire, what is interesting is even closing the gap in other primary states like South Carolina. It's got a lot of momentum. His campaign says that Iowa is not necessarily a must-win state. I tend to disagree. I think he needs the momentum moving forward. But Trump is not infallible. And slowly but surely, Rubio is also gaining points, 13, 15%. I thought I'd throw that in for you, Lucy. But again, the race is up for grabs, in my opinion, still. There's nothing set in stone. We'll see how it develops.
And the moment you have Trump throwing things out there, I mean, he's playing this whole Ted Cruz not being born in America thing. So far, it gives you a sense of what's going on in there. If he was set, he's got it made, he wouldn't have to be throwing that out there. He's throwing it out there, even though legally there's no issue for him to run for president whatsoever. But he's trying to do anything to knock down Cruz. It shows that he's not invincible.
Okay, do you want to talk about Donald Trump?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about Donald Trump.
Of course you're happy to talk about Donald Trump.
He's still firmly in control of the race. But as I said, I was expecting people such as Christie to start maybe sneaking up on him, maybe Jeb Bush to rebound slightly. They're both polling at about 4%. Jeb's campaign is fully imploded. Really what you're looking to now, in terms of the moderate candidate, is there another moderate candidate besides Rubio that can actually challenge Trump? I don't see it.
Answer.
We have 2 debates coming up before the caucuses begin. I agree with Charles that Rubio is the moderate person, but it's a race between the 3 of them right now as I see it, and it's going to be fascinating to see how they go after each other to try to...
I know how it works, and I know we don't have much time, and I could see how you're acting, and by that I know we don't have that much time.
No, I still have one thing that I want to speak with you
Sheldon
about.
Adelson, maybe?
Yeah.
I know. So the
talk about it.
The crossover, I know her well, I'm in the control every night. The crossover between Israeli and American politics. Mega donor Sheldon Adelson, his favorite candidate is reportedly Marco Rubio. His wife's is reportedly Cruz. He has not decided who to back. And you're looking at, in 2012, he spent $100 million during the presidential campaign. It won't determine the race, but whoever gets his support is going to get a huge boost.
This money can go to so many poor people.
Yeah. It can, and let's remember, Donald Trump doesn't have this issue whatsoever. So even if he does get defeated in the first few states, the money is not an issue, because that's usually what happens. The funders drop away. He'll stick around. He's going to stick around and fight it out as long as he can, perhaps all the way until the end, which is something we really haven't seen before, or certainly recently in the Republican Party.
I missed you guys.
Me too.
I did not miss talking about Donald Trump.
Well, last week I wasn't allowed.
And I promised your grandmother that I'm not going to talk about Donald Trump, and you did.
She was upset at me.
Of course. You will receive a text message after this. And now we're talking about Spain. After an inconclusive election last month, Spain's socialist leader reiterated today that he would not back another term for acting Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy. The political turmoil comes as Catalonia's parliament swore in a new separatist leader, increasing pressure on national politicians to reach a deal on a new government. I-24 News correspondent Ayman Siksik has the story.
Weeks after an inconclusive election in Spain, the country can finally see an end to the political stalemate which has left its parliament in limbo. The election had ended with the center-right Popular Party and the center-left Socialists refusing to join a grand coalition. But a fast-moving process in Catalonia could change all that. In its long campaign to break away from Spain, Catalonia now has a new weapon, Carles Puigdemont.
We are now at the last stretch to complete the process towards independence, which started years ago with massive demonstrations and a democratic response by the people of the country.
A fiercely secessionist leader, 53-year-old Puigdemont, was elected thanks to a last-minute show of unity. The prospect of Catalonian independence could encourage the socialists in Spain to finally team up with Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy in hopes of halting the move.
I will not allow anyone to attribute upon themselves unlimited powers. I want to remind all members of the Catalan parliament that democracy is equally strong, whether there is an acting government or not.
Catalan nationalism has intensified due to Spain's economic downturn, sending scores of pro-secession demonstrators to the streets of Madrid. Meanwhile, new Spanish far-left party Podemos favors a referendum on Catalonian independence, while Prime Minister Rajoy refuses to negotiate on the matter. It now remains to be seen whether the new hope for Catalonian independence could push the Spanish government to unite, if only to block it.
Entering the studio running with the fresh news coming out of the oven is Jonathan Regev.
And so surprising! Immense surprise. Leo Messi is the Ballon d'Or for 2015.
No.
Wouldn't you guess?
Really?
Now, putting sarcasm aside, he deserves it. Yes, he took Barcelona to the treble. He took Argentina to the Copa America final. He deserves it. And that's the only good thing I can say about the Ballon d'Or. I'm sorry.
Last year, you were sitting here and you said the same thing about Cristiano Ronaldo.
No, and Cristiano Ronaldo deserved it last year. But you know what? I would have given it to Neymar this year. I would have given it to Manuel Neuer last year. And I would have given it to Franck Ribéry the year before. Because Messi and Ronaldo, they are humongous, gigantic players. Enough. There are other good players.
Is there any discussion about this fact that these two are always getting all the prizes? Yes, these two are the only two stars that everybody's talking about. We need maybe a new competition.
It's impossible to. How can you compare strikers such as Messi and Ronaldo again? Humongous, great, outstanding strikers with outstanding defensive players or goalkeepers who are just as important. Manuel Neuer, for example, last year was a leading factor in Germany running all the way to the World Cup, beating Argentina in the final. But once you have
hurts you, right?
Yes, it does.
It hurts you.
But once you have those Messis and Ronaldos which score so many beautiful goals, they deserve their trophies. They deserve it. But
what do you want?
Someone else.
Someone
who's not Messi and Ronaldo.
Do you think that next year we will see someone who is not Messi and Ronaldo?
No.
So they're going to. How much are they earning for this? Is there any prize? Except of course the Golden Ball.
It does give them a certain amount, but again, the money they get from playing football is huge money, but that's a small money when compared with what they make from endorsements. So there's huge money in it. Again, both deserve it. Leo Messi deserves it, and Cristiano Ronaldo last year deserved it, and the last 500 years when they both won it, they deserve it. But there are other very, very, very good players who deserve it also.
I don't know if you noticed, our dear viewers, that Jonathan Regev is really, really angry. He is.
And the ceremony was so long.
They really, really deserve it. If I can do just a recap about the amount of times that you said deserve in 30 seconds.
Deserve and yet.
And yet. Yes. Jonathan
Having
Regev.
Having said that. Oh, the English vocabulary.
Jonathan Regev, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations to Lionel Messi. We're going out for a small break, an update from our news desk, and then we will be back for the third part of the news today. Don't go anywhere. And yet.